Welcome to the deep dive. So if you're tuning in today, you probably share this. This is a very specific feeling that's hard to pin down.
Mm.
It's the sense that you're consuming so much information. You read the news, you see the data, you watch all the expert breakdowns, and, on paper, it all makes sense.
It's all logically sound. You feel like you get it. You understand inflation or supply chains or what's happening geopolitically.
Exactly. I understand it. But that understanding, it never quite lands. It doesn't turn into a real conviction.
Right. It never becomes a basis for a solid, internalized judgment. The explanation might feel correct in your head, but it just doesn't sit right with what you're actually experiencing.
That's the perfect way to put it. And look, our mission today isn't to predict what's next. We're not here to tell you what to do.
No.
What we are here to do is examine the structure of that feeling, of that unease.
Mm.
We want to treat this confusion not as, a personal failure on your part, but as a symptom of a huge structural shift that's happening just beneath the surface.
Yeah, we've been looking at sources that offer a kind of a structural map for this.
Yeah.
It helps to see the movement of this invisible medium that really holds our economies together. By just defining the coordinates, we can maybe stop trying to fix what feels like a psychological problem when it's actually a systemic one.
We're trying to define the outline of a change that's already well underway. Okay, so let's start there. Let's really ground this feeling of disconnect. The sources are pretty clear on this point. We live in a moment where the news is perfectly understandable.
The explanations are logical, the figures add up.
And yet there's this persistent lack of conviction. It's there all the time.
And it's more than just saying the future is unclear. The analysis points out that the future's very outline remains undefined.
What's the difference?
Well, it means we don't just lack specific predictions. We can't even sketch the basic shape of what might happen. That's a very different kind of instability than, say, a normal recession.
And I think most of us, our default reaction is to think, well, I just need to read more, or I need to find a smarter economist to follow.
Right. But the structural analysis we're looking at just rejects that idea entirely.
Yeah.
It argues this feeling isn't coming from pessimism or from you not knowing enough. It's stemming from a deep structural conflict.
The conflict where what?
Where the very prerequisites we use to understand reality, the basic rules of how things work, are simultaneously just ceasing to apply.
Wow. Okay, so that's like trying to use a map where north and south just randomly swap places.
Exactly. And that's why the source material views this state of understanding something rationally but not being able to form a judgment about it, not as an anomaly, but as a completely normal fluctuation. It's just what happens when a major system is shifting into its next phase.
So we're just feeling the side effects of a huge transition.
That's the argument.
Yeah.
And that detachment is so pervasive because it's structural.
And we feel that detachment in really tangible ways every single day. I mean, think about the inconsistencies you probably experience. The whole relationship between your effort and your reward feels
Unmoored. Completely.
totally unmoored. You work harder, but the result seems almost random. Your sense of what money is worth, what prices mean, it's unstable.
And the institutions, the experts that we used to rely on for clarity.
They feel so detached from the reality we're living in. They speak a language that, it makes sense on a spreadsheet, but it doesn't reassure you at all.
That disconnection is a signal. It tells us that whatever medium used to connect the physical economy, the stuff we can touch and measure, to that institutional layer, well, that medium is changing its fundamental nature, and we have to identify it to map the transition. So when we think about an economy, we usually start with the physical things, right? Resources, energy, technology, labor, life itself.
Tangible stuff.
The tangible stuff, yes. But there's this crucial, invisible medium that binds it all together, that gives it meaning, that lets it circulate.
And that's not just money or capital. You're saying it's something deeper.
Much deeper. The sources we're looking at call this medium credit, but they define it very broadly. Yeah. It's fundamentally built on shared trust. Credit is the state of being believed to have value. It's that collective belief that sustains money and markets and institutions. If that belief shifts, the entire value structure shifts, no matter how many barrels of oil you have.
Right. So let's unpack how that belief, how that medium has been transforming. Historically, it felt more solid.
It was anchored to sovereign authority, the power of a nation-state, the gold standard, the perceived integrity of a central bank. Trust was centralized.
You knew who was backing the system.
Exactly. But the sources suggest that credit is quietly changing its very nature. It's decoupling from those old centralized anchors. It's becoming pure information.
Wait, hold on. Credit is becoming information? That sounds a little philosophical. Can you ground that for me?
Okay, yeah, fair enough. Think about how we assessed a company's value before the internet. It was mostly based on physical assets, right?
Yeah.
Inventory, factories, profits.
Sure, tangible value.
Anchored value. Now, a company's value often rests on its potential, on the network effect of its platform. And that's managed entirely by code, user data, and, well, by the expectation of future dominance.
Which is just information.
It's highly volatile information, updated every microsecond. It's not a physical asset sitting at a hold. The value isn't in the factory anymore. It's in the software, the operating system, that manages the logistics and the users.
I see.
So if you scale that up, the implications are profound. The new measure of value is less about the raw resource or the tech itself, and it's shifting drastically toward three. Let's call them informational factors.
Okay, what are they?
First, as we said, which operating system manages it? Is it a proprietary algorithm? A state-controlled system? A decentralized protocol? The OS dictates everything.
And the second would be the narrative, the story that justifies its growth.
Absolutely. Is the story about saving the climate or AI dominance or global equity? The narrative is critical.
And the third?
Velocity, the speed at which its value is updated, traded, and recirculated around the globe. This quiet transition where value is now set by the OS, the narrative, and the speed. This is what the sources call the rewiring of the global membrane.
The global membrane. You mean that whole invisible web of expectations and trust that holds global commerce together? So
Yeah.
it's not collapsing, it's just being fundamentally rewired. The rules are changing, and so are the speed limits of the system itself. And this is where it gets painful, right? That this rewiring isn't happening smoothly. It creates this huge amount of friction, what the sources call a velocity difference, or shear.
Yes, shear. That's the friction you get when different parts of a system move at wildly different speeds. And this concept, shear, is probably the most useful tool for understanding our current unease.
So what are the different speeds?
We're basically seeing three distinct speeds operating at the same time. At the very top, you have the high-speed layer. This is finance, high-frequency trading, AI, algorithm.
The millisecond layer.
Exactly. Then there's the medium-speed layer. This is where institutions live. Corporations, governments, supply chains. They move at the pace of quarterly reports, or 5-year plans, or election cycles.
Months and years.
Right. And then at the bottom, there's the low-speed layer. That's us. That's the physical body, human decision-making, culture, daily life. That's the speed at which we can build a bridge or change a societal habit.
Decades. Or even generations.
So
I get the layers, but how does the high-speed layer an algorithm say actually drag the low-speed layer of my daily life with it?
Because credit is now information, and information flows at that highest speed. So the instantaneous judgments made in that fast layer, a flash crash, a sudden revaluation of a currency, they immediately drag and redefine the reality for the slow layer.
It's like a self-driving car going 100 miles an hour, and the passenger is just sitting in the back trying to read a paper map and decide where to stop for lunch.
That's a perfect analogy. The passenger is not setting the pace. And that massive speed difference is what generates the friction heat we all feel. It brings us right back to where we started.
Explanations are rational, but unconvincing.
Because they're trying to bridge two completely different realities. The numbers integrate perfectly into the high-speed system, but they fail to reassure the low-speed human because the connection just feels broken.
Things are technically correct, but subjectively they're unbelievable.
And that is a structural phenomenon. It's not a personal failing. It's a speed difference.
So the instability we feel isn't really about a lack of wealth in the system. It's more about not knowing who or what is actually guaranteeing value anymore.
That is the core insight. The instability comes from our inability to grasp which layer credit is actually living in at any given moment.
It's dispersing, right? From the nation state, to the city, to the corporation, to the platform, to the individual algorithm.
And as it disperses, expectation and responsibility get separated completely. Judgment and results get delayed, and the ultimate guarantor of value becomes unclear. And that structural uncertainty is what leads to the anxiety and overreaction we see everywhere.
So this gives us a framework, a lens to see the mechanism itself, the velocity shear, without just reducing it to a psychological problem or a political fight.
Exactly.
So we've defined the structure of the unease, but this is, by design, not a conclusion. This whole analysis isn't meant to predict the future. The source material calls it Pre-processing for handling future probability without error.
Right. It's about setting up the frame, not finding the final answer.
We're not trying to solve the problem today.
No. Our goal here is really achieved if, after listening to this, you feel like you've gained a standard point for reconsideration, or maybe a position to return to before making a judgment. We're not asking for immediate total comprehension of these ideas.
It's not a test.
Not at all. What this provides is a coordinate. It's an internal anchor point. It allows you to pause and just acknowledge the structural fluctuation without feeling like you're losing your mind. If the external world is being rewired, you need an internal coordinate to hold on to.
And how should anyone listening use this map day to day? Is this something you're supposed to be thinking about all the time?
No, not at all. In fact, the sources suggest its real power comes later. This isn't for daily reference.
Okay.
Its true purpose is to be something you pull out, maybe months or even years from now, when you once again feel that the descriptions of reality are running hollow or your own judgments just feel stalled. The thought should be something like,
Do you remember there was this way of capturing the fluctuation?
precisely. That structural shift from nation-state credit to information credit, and that velocity shear, what were those coordinates? You know, this whole structural analysis, it raises a really profound, implicit question that it just leaves hanging there for us to think about.
Yeah.
If value, and therefore power, is increasingly tied to these high-velocity narratives and management operating systems, how long can the essential low-speed life layer of the daily culture, our communities, our physical lives, how long can it be sustained by the demands of that relentlessly accelerating high-speed OS?
That question of sustainability across different speeds,
Yeah.
that feels like the key thing to hold on to.
I think so.
This framework is a reference point then. It's for navigating a reality where the old anchors, the nation state, the central bank, they just don't feel sufficient anymore to guarantee value or provide any real clarity.
It shifts the focus.
Yeah. It helps us shift from asking what is happening to maybe understanding what is the structural mechanism that makes me feel this way. Thank you for joining us for the deep dive. We'll be here again when you need a new structural map.